Our guest today is David Anthony, president and owner of Anthony Funeral Homes. Good to have you with us here today, Dave.
Thank you, Norm. I'm happy to be here.
You know, being in the funeral home business, I'm sure a lot of people would be curious, what led you to go into that profession in the first place?
Well, my grandfather, actually, it's a family thing. He started this back in 1917. And it went through the entire family. His son had worked there, and my mother was his youngest daughter. My uncle decided to get out of the business. My mom and dad purchased it from him, and they died fairly suddenly, so I ended up taking over at a very young age. And interestingly enough, was not very happy. I thought it was definitely not what I wanted to do. We had put the business up for sale at one point, and when we were selling it, the guys that were working there both quit because we didn't offer it to them, and once they quit, it started getting fun. And for the first time, I realized it was the people working there, not the job itself. And the deal fell through, and here I am.
Dave, question I have, there's a lot of discussion out there in the business professional world, leaders talking about what do you do to enhance your spirit or do what you enjoy. And in fact, the last times I've seen you recently have been at funerals. How do you keep from being down, or to put it another way, what is it about the work you do that you enjoy?
There's probably two parts to the answer to that question. The first one is that very little time in my day is spent around sad people. Figure you have an hour's worth of calling hours, a couple hours, 2, 3, 4, whatever, and then maybe an hour and a half, 2 hours before then, helping out people, getting everything ready for that, out of 3 or 4 8-hour days. So that's not very much time at all to be sad. But we've always felt the comparison of a surgeon who actually has to cut into you, cause you some pain to cure what's wrong with you. And while grief it doesn't feel good, it is good for you, and it is the way we help to get back to where we need to be without the person being there.
How do you maintain an environment for the folks that you lead to who work in the business? How do you keep their spirits alive?
The biggest thing is, first we insist on absolute honesty, which, believe it or not, is difficult. But once you learn how to do it, you feel much better about it. There's no gray areas. You don't have to suffer through wondering if you're ever going to get caught and things like that. Plus, we have a lot of fun. We make a lot of jokes, kid around when people aren't around, and we also, just a caveat on that is that we don't ever talk about the families or the dead people. We're very, very sensitive to them. Very sensitive to the fact this is somebody's mother, father, brother, uncle, and we want to take care of them as if they were our own, and that's important.
What would you say you find most challenging about the work, or even have those challenges changed through the years?
A lot of paperwork now is probably the biggest change over the years. Children's funerals, baby funerals, any sort of an unexpected death there's a perception of incompleteness. We find those are harder, and a lot of funeral directors like to push those away, give them to a younger guy. And I'm of the thought that this is where the rubber meets the road. It's where we are trained to do and should know how to do well. And to give it to the least trained guy isn't fair to the family. It isn't fair to the guy because he's not going to learn how to do it properly. And it's the times where you really feel you're making an almost immediate difference because they have some pretty intense needs right at the beginning.
Forgive me for asking it in this way, but some might say that you are involved in the business of death. Okay, what might you say to those folks that maybe arouse in them a greater sense that you're really involved in the business of life?
Mm-hmm. Well, one of the things you get running a funeral home is you learn that you're going to die. and you're reminded of it on a daily basis. I can't go through a whole day thinking about how I'm at some point going to die. That really creates an introspection as you're going along that makes things easier during your day, but it keeps it all very real at the same time. It is a nice way to make money. I've found with working that if you're working only for the money, you will never be happy and you'll never make enough money. But if you're working because it does things and it does help people, that what we do, it does make them feel better. It does get them started in a real confusing time in the past they need to get going on. And we facilitate that. We've often said that it's like pulling a wedding together in 3 days, that you need all the people, you invite them, everything but the food. And even now we have a luncheon room in the back where we can offer food, but it's a lot of organization that needs to be done quickly.
Somebody comes to you, you mentioned the loss of a child, especially with that. People may wonder even, oh, gee, I'm going to go to the funeral home. I don't even know what to say to the person. What would you say to somebody like that if they're wondering how to respond to somebody who's been through a difficulty?
Honestly, there probably is nothing you can say, anything whatsoever. The best thing is your presence, number one, and your closeness. I'm sorry in a hug does 1,000 times more than anything you're going to say. Nothing's going to make them feel better. People always want to find meaning to things, that God has a purpose for this, and unfortunately He doesn't. He didn't do this to teach you anything or me anything. It's the way the world was set up, and all the poisons we put into the air and all the places we even put ourselves in danger in. We talked a bit about the tornadoes coming through, and they wouldn't cause nearly as much damage if we didn't congregate in cities.
Yeah. Well, hey, thank you so much for this opening segment. We'll be back for the next segment to talk further with Dave Anthony.